Hello and welcome to Art Show. I'm Craig Stover, and today I have with me Emily Steinberg. Hi, Emily. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. So I wanted to start by sharing some works of yours. So I went on your site and social medias, and I selected a couple of pieces that I thought were interesting, outstanding pieces I might have question about. And I wanted to start with this piece because I think this is a wonderfully sweet little painting.
Hmm.
So I've got a question for you. How big is this? What am I looking at in terms of size?
Yeah, this painting is 36 inches by 36 inches, so it's three
Okay.
feet square.
All right. I figured that by the size of the marks. And is there a little story behind this? I have a feeling there is.
Yeah, there is a little story. So I make autobiographical visual narratives, and lately I've been turning them into paintings
Mm-hmm.
and calling them my diary paintings.
Hmm.
And so basically, it's sort of whatever is happening at the moment
Hmm.
is what goes into the painting.
Okay.
And
And so is this like a daily ritual for you, or every
it's
other day or something?
So what happens is I'll be working on four at a time, but this instance might be happening, this for instance, this is in my backyard. It's my dog and the two neighbors' dogs who basically come and hang out.
Hmm.
And it's just kind of a moment that I made a painting about. And so
Okay.
that's sort of what's happening. Yeah.
Well, it's a fun little painting. I really like, and I like the whole series that kind of goes along with this. The brush strokes, the looseness of it, it all works. But I also wanted to make sure that I covered this part of your life, so it's completely different. So these graphic novels, what do you call them?
Yeah, I call them visual narratives.
Visual.
Yeah.
So there's so many of these on your website. It was tough to pick something. So I just wanted to show this one and then guide people to your website to see all of them because they're quite interesting the way they go. How did how did these start?
So it's really interesting. So I've been painting since I was 18.
Okay.
And I had a moment about 20 years ago where I kind of just I didn't really understand why I was painting anymore. And so I've always been a writer. And so I started writing and I started then putting words and images together, and that really captivated me. And I've been doing it really seriously for the last 20 years.
Okay.
Um,
Is
so
the
that's
writing in is it inventive, or is the writing is it fiction, nonfiction? How would you describe it?
It's always autobiographical.
Okay. And
Yeah,
does it have to be something big that happens in your life, or can it also be the mundane?
it's both.
Okay.
Yeah, big and the mundane.
And these are done on sort of smaller formats, I assume.
Yeah, so it sort of varies. I mean, sometimes I'll draw and then scan them.
Okay.
And then sometimes I've been lately been working straight onto the iPad and Procreate, and that's been really great, but I kind of miss the drawing. So I think I might be going back to pencil and paper because it's just
Okay.
so much better.
I love the immediacy. I totally understand. I'm curious, most people understand what happens when you make a painting, that, it could hang on a wall, or people can then, buy it if they want, hang it in their homes or whatnot. What happens with these?
Well, the hope eventually is that I will find a literary agent and then get them published.
Okay. All
So
right.
I'm working actually right now on a an autobio memoir about family and history, and it's going to draw from some of these things, but it's kind of a larger piece.
Okay.
And that's what I'm working on, and sort of in talks with a publisher to do that. But the
Okay.
hope is that eventually these guys might end up in a book someday.
So you've got a lot of these, because I can imagine that you've got a lot of stories to tell.
Yeah.
My wonder is, when you say publish these, are you talking about just the one that you're working on now, or are you talking about like a compendium of all these different series of pieces that you have?
I'm eventually, I mean, I'm hoping that eventually all of the littler ones get collected into an anthology together.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Do you ever take like outstanding pieces of this work and find yourself like framing it and hanging it up, treating it like a
I think that's the next move. I
okay.
haven't done it yet. Actually, that's not true. I have done it. I've done several shows in which images from my stories have been on the wall. Yep.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful sort of uh it's a support system I see for your other paintings. I mean, they combine, but they have there's different ways to access them, I want to say. So I think
Definitely.
do you find one doing one is makes the other stronger, or do you find that they both flow out of you evenly?
That's really interesting. I think they both come out evenly because I'm just really interested in whatever is out there in the world. I'm interested in looking at it and seeing it and drawing it and investigating it. And the same with my stories.
Mm-hmm.
So, and usually a lot of the objects that I paint, like this one, for instance, have a story behind them.
That's exactly where I was going with this. And it's interesting that, your other stories, they're multiple panels, but I can get just as much out of this teacup as I can of the other ones. I'm
Right.
walking away with a lot of questions. Whose cup is this and how old is it? What's the story behind it? And just the,
These are all great questions. So this particular story has to do with my mother
okay. All right.
who loved tea, and
Uh-huh.
she and I would do tea, sometimes we would, she just loved it.
Uh-huh.
And she was incredible. And she ended up, unfortunately, almost 20 years ago in the Unitarian Universalist home in Mount Airy,
Okay.
which was an old house, a very sort of a wonderful old mansion, and there was a collection of teacups there.
Uh-huh.
And so I asked the lady if I could borrow the teacups and take them home and paint them.
Okay.
And I did.
All
And
right.
this is one of them.
Okay. All right. Interesting. Well,
Yeah.
as soon as you said that your mother likes tea, it made me think and realize that there's a series of these teacups that I've seen on your website, but it's just the teacups. There's no tea in them. They're all empty cups.
Right.
Is that an
Right. It's just
overreading?
the object.
Right. Yeah, it's a wonderful again, it has that sort of whimsical quality about it, but at the same time, it's got all these lovely textures uh and I really appreciate the scale values of the colors that you have on these. It makes them fun. These are
Hmm.
fun pictures.
Hmm.
Speaking of fun pictures, so you also have a series of portraits on your website, but this one in particular, there's got to be a story behind this. Who is this guy?
This is Fred.
Okay.
And Fred is a poet who
Okay.
lives in Frenchtown, New Jersey.
All right.
And he's just an amazingly wonderful man. I met him through my friend John Schmidberger, who owns a gallery up in Frenchtown. And often we would go up there and have painting and just paint whoever wanted to sit there for the day. So
Okay.
that day, Fred was sitting.
All right. Do you often ask people, "Hey, can I paint your
Yeah,
portrait?" Yeah.
always.
Yeah. That's a fun thing. It usually throws people off. They're not sure what to say.
Yeah, and they don't usually like it because in the end they say, well, I look sad or I'm not
Oh, yeah.
smiling or
Yeah.
whatever. But
Yeah. That's
yeah,
okay. It's not for them anyway, so
right.
that's fine.
Right. No, but I love painting people, and often I think if someone is just wearing a particularly good shirt or something, I
Hmm.
just always say, well, you have to sit for me. And they're just like, what is that about? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I when I first started to see these, because of the fact that artists set up all kinds of rules, whether they're aware of it or not. And I think one of your rules is really sort of minimizing shadow,
Hmm.
which that's to me that's a real Alice Neal kind of way of approaching. Really getting at the subject and not worrying about it's already got dimensionality implied to it, and it doesn't sort of need it. So I don't know. Is she somebody that you look at?
I mean, definitely. Like
Yeah,
ever since I was maybe 18 years old,
yeah.
I was sort of directed into the Alice Neal.
Yeah.
You know,
Why
I
not?
mean,
I mean, her
her
paintings
and
are magnificent. Yeah.
oh
I can
yeah,
I
and
can see
her
it a
and
little bit in
the
that, and also the fact that you put that just that little bit of blue under the beard. That's a
hmm
Neil thing to do as
hmm
well. I
Well, her
really,
and the German expressionists, I think.
yeah.
That's who really kind of drew me into painting as a
Hmm.
young person.
Like the Blue Riders or earlier.
Ernst Ludwig Kirchner,
Oh yeah, Kirshner. Yeah, fantastic.
just these kind of really aggressive, intense portraits.
Hmm.
So yeah.
So I had to show this piece because I vacation in Maine every year as well.
Okay.
So I had to show this. I just love this particular piece. Um, Again, I'm sure there's a little story behind this. Um, do you is this a place that you just went to once, or do you go up occasionally?
So this you're so observant because this has such a story. It's such a great story behind this one.
It looks like it does.
Yeah. No, we went to this was Little Deer Island
Yep.
and we went there once and I definitely want to go back.
Mm-hmm.
We went there for a month because it was inexpensive and we could afford 4 weeks, which was
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
Which was
Right.
and so we stayed in this house. The house was fine,
Yeah.
but across the street from the house and through they owned the land all the way down to the water. So across the street from the house, we went through, you had to walk through kind of ferns and woods and all
Yep.
kinds of different things. And you got to a boathouse
Mm-hmm.
at the edge of the water and we were up on a promontory and the boathouse was built I believe in 1845. And
Mm-hmm.
the cool I started going down to the boathouse and hanging out and reading and drawing and doing all that sort of stuff and kind of cleaning it up. And then one day I decided I just wanted to paint the view, and this is the view from the boathouse.
Mm-hmm.
And amazingly, the I had 10 canvases that I wanted to work on while I was up in Maine.
Mm-hmm.
These 10 canvases fit exactly the length of the boathouse.
Okay.
So I was basically I'd work on one and then I'd put it back and then I'd
Yeah.
work on another and that's how I created the whole thing.
Yeah. It works out, and I really like the fact that it is that long. That it really,
Oh
because that's what Maine's like. These horizons that just keep going on forever.
my
Uh,
God, just seeing it makes me want to be there right now.
yeah, yeah. I go up every year, and I have a very similar view with the water and whatnot. So it's wonderful. Uh, Last painting I wanted to show, just because it's one of my favorites. I really enjoy the uh, variety of uh, textures and the movement in the leaves that you got there. It's compared against that flat sky and um, the ground as well. Is I assume this is behind your house?
This is actually my house where I
Okay.
grew up.
Oh, okay. So
Um,
is this a memory painting, or were you actually outside painting
so
this?
this is actually a really old painting, and it's
Okay.
actually one of my favorite paintings. It's I was outside, I was on the porch, I was painting this.
Okay.
It actually lives right now in a house up in Manhattan, which is really nice. But what I loved about it was the kind of architecture. I love painting architecture and nature together,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and the kind of the straight lines of architecture against the organic lines of nature. And
Mm-hmm.
I think that is really summed up nicely here. The way you've got these sort of houses, these really boring 1960s sort
Mm-hmm.
of tract homes
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by this kind of unbelievable green.
I like the geometry forces your eye to stay inside the picture. You can't, there's no
Hmm
exit once you're in it, which I really like. It's kind of cozy with that yellow, sort of
Yep.
making it that way. So
Yep.
I'm curious, I want to know about your beginnings in art. And a question I really like to ask artists is, do you have an earliest memory of being exposed to art, something that still sticks to this day?
There are so many. I mean, I think I've always known somehow. I've
Okay.
always been a creative person. I always knew I was going to do something in the arts. Initially, I have a comic book that I made that I still have from when I was 6 or 7,
Okay.
which is
All right.
hilarious to look at.
Uh-huh.
And you know, when I was little, we went to the art museum and sat on those little benches, and it always felt like that was kind of the place where I needed to be. I was an actress for many, many, many years. And when I was about 18, I made the decision that I was going to focus on visual art because I felt like I'd always be able to do it, even if I wasn't part of a
Hmm.
collaboration.
Yeah.
And so
Similar
that
thoughts
was sort
myself.
of, that was, yeah,
Uh-huh.
that was it. But I always, I mean, I've always been, I remember at little friend's house, seeing paintings on the wall and being
Uh-huh.
really, just really interested in visual imagery.
So at what point did you decide, like, yeah, I'm definitely I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna become an artist.
Freshman year in college.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
was there anybody at that point or maybe later who really sort of I use the expression lit your fire? Anybody who was instrumental in sort of moving you forward?
You mean in terms of artist
Yeah.
mentors?
Yeah.
Philip Guston
Okay. All right.
blew my mind.
As in
And
his work, not him. I mean,
yeah, I just love I love, love, love his work.
yeah.
So he's fantastic. And believe it or not, on the other side of things, Fairfield Porter,
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
um,
I
you know, I'm
love his
really,
those main paintings that he does. I can see that.
yeah. I mean, I
Right.
was trained Alex Katz. I love
Yeah.
Alex Katz. I was trained at Penn, which is an observational landscape school.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I love that kind of painting. I love
So,
it.
so
And
speaking of that kind of painting, I'm kind of curious about your process. I love to talk to artists about this. First off, quickie question: um, do you keep a sketchbook, and do you use those sketchbooks for paintings?
so I used to keep a sketchbook. Now I mainly take pictures and look at the pictures and draw from the pictures.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
So, do you when you talking about looking at the pictures, are you still looking at them digitally, or do you actually print them out
No, I look at them digitally.
digitally? Okay.
Yeah. So
Uh,
yeah.
so is that the fuel that sparks your creativity to make new work,
Well,
looking
for
at
instance,
resource
the
materials?
sometimes, but it's also just looking out the window.
Okay, all right.
So if I need, I mean, you know, I'll go outside, I go onto site, I'll look, my studio has this great view right out there, which I can just see what's going on. So, but if I need something close up and I need something that's not happening at the time, I'll, you know,
Hmm.
use some sort of aid. But
Do
I
you
really like to work perceptually.
do you always sort of have an idea what you're going to do, or do you ever just like set it up and just go?
The second, it's
Really?
the
Okay.
second, yeah.
I can see that within the brushwork that you're making, so that makes sense to me. Um,
Hmm.
uh, what is it about? So you use there's a lot of works on paper that you do, and then there's
Hmm.
some on canvas, I assume.
Hmm.
So what is it about these materials that you like working with?
Uh, which works on paper are you referring to?
Any of them? I'm just kind of curious because uh, you could do sculpture or you could do poetry with words or dance or any kind of thing, but you're choosing to use visual mediums. You're choosing to use paint and you're choosing to use inks and
Hmm.
papers.
Okay, so first of all, I use oil paint and I can't handle acrylic paint. It just doesn't work for me. And there's something about the ushy gushy in like sort
You
of
got to push it, and oil paint I think glides.
you got to push it.
Yeah.
And it's really viscous.
Hmm.
And I love that. So in some ways there's a sort of sculptural quality for me in painting.
So
And
nerd question: what's your medium? What's your thinner for oil paint? Then do you have a
linseed
formula?
oil and a little
Just
turp.
and a little turp. Any
Yeah.
varnish? You ever put a little Damar into it or
No.
anything? Okay. Just
At
curious. I always
Penn, we learned nothing about any of the techniques. It was pure, just like you just paint.
uh say I went to UArts and we had books on like formulas for all kinds of things. It was wonderful.
We didn't have it.
Well, it's never too late. So
Yep.
um do you ever find yourself so you make a picture. Do you ever hit the wall and find out like, okay, this painting's a dead end? Do you ever discard stuff, repaint
Yeah, all
stuff?
the time.
All the time.
I mean, not
Okay.
all the time, but a lot of, well, usually what happens is I'll just paint, I'll keep working on it until it's where I want it to be.
Have you ever reworked older work?
Hmm.
Okay.
But not so much anymore. I
Okay.
mean, lately I'm feeling much more that in command of what I want to be happening. I went through a phase where I was working on these gigantic, like 6 foot by 6 foot, what I called they were kind of diary paintings, but sort of also, I don't know what they were. I called it This Is My Country.
Hmm.
And they just never really gelled because I don't think I really knew what I was going for in the end.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I think that I just sort of abandoned that
Yeah. Well,
and
you've been
moved on.
I understand, like I could just retire that. No, nobody needs this.
Yeah.
I'm thinking- So you've been making work for a while now. Have you noticed uh I assume that your creative process has changed over time? How do you think it's changed?
Sort of. I mean, sort of, but not really. I mean, the fact that the fact that I have the visual narrative part of my life, which is huge,
Hmm.
that's really the big change.
Okay.
But that's been 20 years.
All right. Right.
Um, but in painting, when I'm making a painting, it's almost like it's 1985. I mean, I'm feeling it's the same. I'm painting the same. I mean, I'm a lot more in control of it than I was
Yeah.
back then,
Right.
and I
Uh-huh.
was messier and more whatever, but it's still that same kind of impulse.
Well, if you're in control and the paintings are mostly autobiographical, uh, does the viewer ever come into your mind while you're making work? Do you ever think about your audiences?
That's a really good question.
You
I
can
don't know.
say no.
I've never really thought about. I mean, I I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we'll do that on part two. You can come
Yeah.
back and answer that one later.
Okay.
When you're painting and you're really into it, are you zoned in or are you zoned out?
Zoned in.
Okay.
Zoned
It's
in.
I love asking that question because I'm always surprised. A lot of artists will tell me the exact opposite of what I think. So
Really?
yeah, yeah. Some people are like, I don't even remember painting it, like highway hypnosis. And others are like,
Wow.
every time I'm doing something, that's all I'm thinking about. So uh, just curious. Have you ever worked in other mediums? Or is there any medium that you've loved to try that you haven't yet?
I've done printmaking
Okay.
and it doesn't, I mean, it's fine.
Okay.
I like to draw and I like to paint,
Okay.
and that's it.
All right. Have you ever
And I
tried
like to
sculpture?
write. And I like to write.
Okay.
Um, yeah,
Yeah.
I think other people can do it better.
Better. I love saying that. I do that all the time. Um, how often are you in your studio?
Pretty much at this point every day.
Oh, really? That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
and does that mean you're actually producing something every day, or you're just standing around?
I mean, usually I'll be working on my graphic novel memoir project. I'm starting 4 new of these diary paintings now, so I'm getting the stuff ready. So it's, a combination of both.
Okay.
Once when I'm in the middle of the paintings, I'm in the middle of like, getting in
Are
there.
you working on multiple things at the same time?
My lately what I've been doing is working on 4 diary paintings at a time
Okay.
because I kind of view them in some ways as panels in a comic strip.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
in some way, they're almost viewed best if they're seen in a quad.
Okay.
Right now they're up at this is a funny story. I'm having a little show at this place called Locals in Winmore,
Okay.
which used to be the bank, and I grew up in Winmore.
Okay.
Um, and so they're not able to hang in a quad there, but I wanted to do it there because I got my first passbook there in 1969, and it was like this kind of nostalgic venue for me.
Hmm.
So it made sense with the whole sort of
Sort
diary
of
paintings
connecting
and the
back.
whole thing.
That does make sense.
Yeah.
Uh, so you're in your studio. Is your studio in your home?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, we're
So
really lucky.
So you're in there every day. You're gonna start work. Do you have studio rituals that you do in order to get moving?
So usually what I'll do is I'll come in and I'm obsessive about Twitter for some reason. I have no idea
Okay.
why. It's not even called Twitter anymore.
All right.
But
So
I
you just
just
do
love
a little doom scrolling for a
I
little
do some
while.
doom scrolling, maybe do corrections on the New York Times
Uh-huh.
connection,
That
whatever. I try to
that
do
gets the
mindless.
brain. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you are you listening to music while you're working or something else to
Yes.
distract your brain?
Yes.
I,
Absolutely.
it's a dumb question, but I'm always sort of surprised. Like the other day, I asked somebody, and she's like, "Well, I have to make myself a half a tuna fish sandwich, and then a half a cup of tea, and then I clean my studio, and then
Right.
it's always kind of funny to see. And other people are like, "No, I just charge in, and just first thing I see, I start doing." So
No, it's a great question.
it's a weird thing, I know. So we have time for just one last question. This has been fun. Question I often stump artists with, simple but can be complicated. What does making art do for you?
It's a good question. So I think it grounds me. It kind of connects me to my reason for being.
Hmm?
Um, and it can be exhilarating. It's like just the fact of creating something, I think is really, really, really interesting and
Okay.
fun.
And
Yeah.
that's it's the fun and interesting and exhilarating is what you crave.
I mean, something like that, yeah. If I'm gonna just be, but I think this grounding thing too, because when I'm not doing it, it feels like I'm just kind of bumbling around.
Right. Have you ever gone for long stretches without making?
Yeah,
Yeah. It's weird,
yeah.
isn't it?
It's weird, yeah. And I mean, usually it was because, things were going on, either you couldn't, I just could, yeah, there have been times and it's been rough.
It's very weird. I always find when I go through a phase like that and I go back, I end up like exploding. Like the first piece I make is like, wow, like I'm
Yes,
building it up or something. I don't know why.
exactly.
Well, Emily, I can't thank you enough for coming by and talking with me today. It's been a real pleasure. I can't
It's,
wait to see your work in pleasure in person. Thank you very much for coming by.
oh,
And I want
thank
to
you
thank
so much,
everybody who
Craig.
tuned in to watch Art Show today. Of course, we love it when you like and subscribe. That really helps support Art Show. If you have any questions, put them in the comments section. We want to hear from you what you think of today's conversation and all of Art Show. So again, thank you for watching. And again, Emily, thanks for tuning in. Thanks.
Thanks so
Take care.
much. Okay.